American League side of things here on the call up. We're talking about prospects who can break camp in that American League. I'm Aram, he's Jack. Of course, we split this into two episodes. If you missed the National League side, go check that out. That was on the end of last week. But this week, I think some more notable prospects, because it's a weird in between thing here where we don't want to highlight prospects that have already debuted. It wouldn't really be that full-fledged break camp. So it has to be a prospect who has not yet debuted. So there's several top prospects that didn't graduate that will surely, be part of the opening day roster for teams, but those aren't the players we can talk about here. We are focusing on the prospects who have not registered a single inning or at bat at the big league level, which means for some teams, you got to dig a little deep. And I think that's what makes it fun. And I would say, though, I think this episode, a few more higher profile prospects, but we also got to dig deep as well.
Yeah, I like there are some high profile, and then there are some 29-year-old relievers that I'm looking at, and it's like, oh, you had a 3-1 in AAA, so you're going to be the guy. That's our break camp candidate. But Jackson Jobe, what are we doing, man? 4 innings in the regular season. We can't talk about you on the call up.
Nope.
A couple other guys, Arelvis Martinez.
Three at
That's a
bats.
loaded conversation. Yeah, 3 at bats, but there are so many guys like that. You got Kumar Rocker getting up at the end of the year as well. There were guys like that on the National League side, but it felt like the American League side. I was looking at, all of these roster situations, and I'm like, oh, I forgot this guy got 15 plate appearances. We can't
Yep.
talk about you.
Which is crazy. And there's a lot of players that just got that cup of coffee and that's about it. Which, by the way, before we get into this, should talk quickly about the Gavin Lux trade.
Yeah.
Uh, Big surprise that not that he was traded necessarily, that he was traded to the Cincinnati Reds. And it makes sense when you start to dig deeper into it. And that's something that I broke down in detail on justbaseball.com about how I think Nick Kroll learned the hard way last year that infield depth can become quite thin really quickly. And I think through that trauma, he was very, very focused on not letting that happen again, right? They addressed the rotation with Brady Singer, and you have Rhett Lauder coming up. I think you can feel really good about where their pitching's at. I think they're going to move Graham Ashcraft to the bullpen where I think he's going to thrive. So you can feel better about the pitching. You can't have a situation where Nick Martini, Mike Ford, Edwin Rios are getting first base DH ABs, which was happening quite a bit last year. And clearly they had no interest in auditioning Noel V. Marte for a consistent amount of time, which when I was writing this piece, man, like I knew it was ugly for Noel V. I didn't realize it was that ugly. It was worse than Jose Barrero, like up there. Like it was really, really bad. He's 23, so they're going to give him time to figure it out in AAA, but like that's got to be the focus. Like that's not a guy that you should be counting on whatsoever at the big league level. And that's what that trade kind of said to me. The fascinating thing is just how do they align the defense?
Yeah.
Again, I get into all that. I'll link it in the episode description. We're hearing more to talk about the prospect side, but there's some really fun wrinkles within that I think they can get creative. And I think it's also just going to be a lot of seeing how guys respond to different spots. Crawl's leaning on the versatility side of things, and I like it. And then on the Dodgers side, which we'll get to, I know you have more to say on the Reds, but good return for the Dodgers, which we'll talk about. Just wanted to tease that. But for the Reds, like I'm sure your initial reaction was the same as mine. It was what the F, but then it was okay, this kind of makes sense. And then the more you dig in, the more it starts to be justifiable, especially when you weren't going to go out and spend a lot of money to go get a right-handed hitting outfielder or whatever it may
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, I think the way that Nick Kroll spun it from what I read, and spun has a negative connotation. The way that he looks at Gavin Lux was a little bit different than the way that I looked at Gavin Lux, where I look at him and say, okay, defensively, I feel like you can only survive at second base, and even then it's not great. But what Nick Kroll was saying to Cincinnati media yesterday after the trade was this guy has logged time in the corner outfield. He started games in center field. He can play some shortstop. Can he play some shortstop? Can he play some third base? I have no idea. What I think they're going to do is they're going to put Gavin Lux in a stress free situation when he gets to Arizona in late February. And they're going to say, hey, man, you can play second base, but we want to see you perform elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've had this conversation on a prospect level. I mean, right in my backyard, like we were having this conversation with Nick York, where I thought he was only able to play second base.
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden he looks passable in left.
Hmm.
Who's to say that Lux goes to a less stressful environment like York did from Boston to Pittsburgh and figures out how to play left because he's a little bit more comfortable and he doesn't need to hit 290 to stay in the lineup like he needed to in Los Angeles.
100%. And I think the other thing that's important to remember, I caught myself in the middle writing the piece. I'm like, okay, wait, we got to give him the benefit of the doubt. It was the first season back from ACL surgery.
Yep.
I'm sure that affected his lateral movement some. The interesting thing was the arm, and it was like a yips adjacent issue that maybe he's able to work through now as well. I definitely think he can play left though. Like you think about what Spencer Steer's doing out there. He's not great. He can get by. I don't think there's no way he's playing a worse left field than Spencer Steer, who should
No,
still
no
potentially be
chance.
playing left. But I think a big part of this that I liked for the Reds too is you're not putting all of your eggs in the Heimer Candelario, Christian Encarnacion Strand bucket, which before this move, they needed both of them, or at least one of them for sure,
Yep.
to have a good year.
Yep.
And not only that, Heimer was probably going to play some third, and he dealt with hamstring, broken toe, another hamstring issue, neck, and I think it really impacted his ability to play third base. Christian Encarnacion Strand played 30 games, so now you don't have as much just all in on those guys. You can move things around. Steer can play first if the aforementioned two are not, holding it down in the
Right.
corners. McLean, I think, even though he hasn't played a lot of third, can play a really high level third with how well he played shortstop, in his rookie season.
Yeah.
You can move things around now that I think it makes it a little bit more fascinating. And I think that was clear the Cooper Bowman pick,
Hmm.
where you were talking about Bowman's versatility. I think Krall said, okay, if I'm not going to be able to spend, I'm going to go all in on versatility and just mix and match and give myself different ways to put the puzzle together. It's like having flexible puzzle pieces instead of being stuck and saying our hands are tied. We got to just find guys that can hold down the position. Ty France was playing first for them last year.
Yeah, so I mean, my thought on this, like again, across sport reference, but when you have a superstar on an NBA roster, what does every GM in the NBA want to surround that superstar with?
Well, good role
Shooters.
players. Yeah.
Shooters. Yeah,
Shooters.
shooters, 3 and D guys. If they could have Wemby and a bunch of 3 and D guys, an NBA GM is incredibly happy.
Yeah.
They have Wemby in Ellie De La Cruz. So now you just want a bunch of role players. You want a bunch of guys that can be Swiss Army knives defensively and survive at a bunch of different spots. And you want some depth there because they experienced firsthand, like you mentioned, what lack of depth can do
Yeah.
to a season. It
Oh, yeah.
torpedoed the season. And like I do think that they are doing their best impression of surrounding a superstar with a bunch of 3 and D guys.
Yep, because they knew they weren't going to get one, and I think the way they get a superstar is by Elito Cruz taking a big step forward. It's not by acquiring a superstar outside of the
What
the
does he need
organization.
to
They're
take a
never going
big
to do
step
that.
forward? Like
Yeah,
he is a superstar already, I
yeah,
think. He put together what, a 6.5, 7 win season
I
last
know,
year?
and I think he's going to take another step forward, which is crazy. Last note on the Red side of it, their infield defense was not good last year from an ounce above average perspective, which is crazy because Elito Cruz was third among all
Amazing.
shortstops in outs above average. But then you think about Candelario and some of the other guys that they were kind of having to force and put into the infield situation there.
Yeah.
They were 19th or 21st in Major League Baseball in outs above average and runs prevented. If you move Matt McLean to third base, we don't know exactly what they're going to do yet, but this is what I would do. McLean at third base with Ellie De La Cruz. That might be the rangiest left side of the infield that you have in baseball, or just about one of. Maybe the Brewers might have something to say about that, depending on how they orient things. But then on top of that, Gavin Lux at second base, he historically has been at least average. I think he'll get closer to that. And then Candelario over to first, or Encarnacion Strand or whatever. That's going to be a much better defensive infield in general. You have Trevino now starting to catch a little bit more, which is going to help you defensively too. And then you can mix and match. So like that. And then quickly on the Dodgers side, they made out really well also.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for the Reds, cheap acquisition, 2 years of control, only $2.7 million. So I like that. But you get Mike Sirota, a guy that was a first round prospect, up until a really rough first half of the season, but he finished really well in the second half. So I thought he was a guy that had at least rebuilt his stock to get into that second round again.
Yeah.
Slipped though. The EVs aren't great. There's still some questions. I think the power was upsold out of Northeastern going into his draft year. And
Yeah.
we saw some of the results of that and then him pressing a little bit. But this is a guy whose floor is so high, right? I think at the very least you got a fourth outfielder here because of the defensive ability. He can run. He's gonna grind out ABs, decent field to hit. I don't know if I see as much upside as, some others have seen. And I know the Dodgers have been in on him for a while. They drafted him in the 16th round out of high school, and it was clearly a draft and follow. But I think the big, big, big get here, and not to knock Sirota, like that's a good get on top of this, but they get the 37th pick in the draft, the Dodgers
Yeah.
do. And either that's going to be helpful because they go out and sign Santander or somebody else again and annoy everybody and give up a comp pick to sign them, or this just gave them their earliest pick in the draft. They were picking
Yeah.
40th, right? So this is now their first pick. But imagine what that does for their bonus pool now as well. We don't have the exact bonus pool numbers, but just ballpark wise, that probably increased their bonus pool by 30%.
I was thinking $2.5 million, right? Isn't that
Yeah. Yeah.
typically
And think
slot?
about if your first pick was several picks after that, and then you're just picking later and later and later, that probably increased their overall bonus pool by 30 to 40%. Disgusting aspect of this is that Nick Kroll actually cited, it's not Kroll's fault, but Nick Kroll actually cited the trade of the pick as reason why the Reds could actually invest more into the roster. I've never really heard a team refer to like I understand that the money has to be paid somehow, but the idea that, oh, we don't have to spend this money in the draft now, so we can actually allocate that towards our roster makes me want to vomit because that money is like it should be separate almost. I understand that's not how business works, but that should be separate. Like that is how you keep your team remotely competitive. There's a reason why there's compensation picks for small market teams. They wouldn't give compensation picks to small market teams if they couldn't afford them. That would
Yeah.
it would be counterintuitive. But they do get those extra picks because it's a no-brainer to spend a couple extra $1 million to have extra draft picks. Seeing that cited as that is wild, but again, for the Dodgers, this gives them a ton of flexibility, whether it be signing a free agent when they have to give up a comp pick or now increasing their bonus pool significantly. This was a great trade for them for a position that they didn't need.
Yeah. To build on that point, no disrespect to Tyson Lewis, but have you heard that name before?
Yeah, he's become a sneaky chase and Bowman draft.
Okay, there you go. So 51st overall pick. He was the Reds' second round pick. They paid 3.05 for him. They paid $3 million for Tyson Lewis. And I do think that the Cincinnati Reds, now this is a conversation that is set for maybe 5 to 7 teams in Major League Baseball where you do feel every dollar spent. I do think that the Cincinnati Reds are now in a situation where they look at that $3 million that they paid Tyson Lewis and they say, that might be a setup guy instead of a second round pick. And I kind of get it. I
Yeah.
don't get it for again 20 to 25 teams in Major League Baseball. But for a team like Cincinnati where again every dollar seems to count, at least that's what I've been reading for the last 3 years since we've been doing this podcast, like I mean, I kind of understand that they view that as maybe, chipping into Jose Leclerc on the back end. You know what I mean?
Yes, but no.
Yeah, I
I
know, I know.
I
Yes,
can't
but no,
stand
it's so
like
backwards, it's stupid. Nobody should have to deal with this, but like I guess they are.
yeah, I get it. But the team though, I actually do believe in where the Reds are headed. I think Kral's been creative and actually done some sneaky decent things here. It's all about health and we'll see how it all comes together. But I think there's some fun aspects of this team. They didn't deplete the farm system significantly though, right? I was wondering if a Sal Stewart was going to be going or anything like that. They didn't move any of those guys, and that seemed to be the priority, I guess, for them there. Or the Dodgers preferred the pick, which I'd imagine they probably did. But
Yeah.
Sirota also seemed like a guy that the Dodgers preferred as well, too, given
They
that
drafted
it
him.
was a draft and follow for them as well. So
Yeah.
let's get into it. You go by division.
Yep.
I'll let you lead the way here.
Easy peasy. Let's start with the National League East, and there are some interest, or the American League East. Sorry, we did the National League last week,
Yeah.
but the American League East. Let's start with the division-winning New York Yankees. This is a really tough one. I thought it was Durbin, and then all of a sudden they moved Durbin to Milwaukee in that Devin Williams deal. I wrote Yorbit Vivas question mark, and then J.C. Escara, who was a guy that was decent in AAA last year, a catcher. Their backup catcher right now to Austin Wells is Alex Jackson, who's a non-roster invite. So it turns into Alex Jackson or J.C. Escara. I also think if they do move Ben Rice, and we've talked about that a couple times, not only on the call up but the Just Baseball show, Rafael Flores could just be Ben Rice. So Flores is another interesting name to me there, where he fills that roster spot if they do move Rice. But Vivas is probably the answer for me, although there's no good answer with the Yankees.
Vivas was my best answer too. But it seems like you kind of have Vivas at home with Oswaldo Cabrera. So like,
Right.
but maybe that's something that in spring training, open competition, if Cabrera struggles, they just decide to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Um, but it's easy to take Oswaldo Cabrera on his 660 OPS for granted. Like guys that play a bunch of positions and give you close to league average offense don't grow on trees. So I like you'd probably be kind of happy with Yorbit Vivas doing that. He wasn't that much better than that in AAA. So Vivas is the answer because he's already on the 40. But the other crazy part is like Oswaldo Cabrera is still pre-arb. So it wouldn't even the only way I could justify it was, oh, maybe they wanted to save a couple million since over the tax. Like that stuff adds up.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really the angle either. They spawn bullpen arms left and right. So like I could see the Yankees like potentially having a bullpen arm that they really like that they thrust in there, but they're already pretty deep in that regard and went out and made some acquisitions. So yeah, I mean, if you had to make your like official pick here, who would it be?
I'll go with JC Escara, who's a catcher on the 40-man roster, and he just makes it over Alex Jackson.
Yeah, I think that's what my bet is here as well. Otherwise, injury again, that's like an obvious one where someone goes down. I think you could see Vivas being that option.
Sure.
Um, but until then, yeah, I mean Cabrera's not going to be the starting third baseman. They're gonna get somebody. So then
Yeah.
Cabrera gets relegated to utility role. You have Peraza as well. It just doesn't seem like it makes a ton of sense. So yeah, I think Escara is definitely the guy that makes the most sense. I think to grab that spot, which is not the most exciting in the world, but I think that's also a testament to Yankees roster being pretty solid overall.
Yeah. If you thought that wasn't sexy, tune out for the Baltimore Orioles. Could you find somebody? So, like for me, Brandon Young is not going to make it because they'll start Trevor Rogers instead of Brandon Young, or they'll start McDermott or Povich. Cade Stroud, I don't think is going to make it because I don't think he's good enough to be in that big league bullpen on opening day. I thought about maybe a right-handed hitting outfielder instead of Daz Cameron, but Judd Fabian was terrible in a brief sample in
Yeah, it's
Norfolk.
not
Like
ready.
I don't like he's nowhere close to ready. Beavers is not ready. Nobody is good enough to unseat Daz Cameron on the opening day roster as the bench outfielder. Uh, I don't have a good answer for you.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if you wanted somebody else to unseat him, it'd probably be one of the non-roster invitees, right? Like a Nick Gordon, a Jordan Adams, which I actually think the Orioles done a good job of just putting irons in the
Not counting
fire and
those
seeing if
guys.
one of those guys can, have something click or get hot. But yeah, I was really struggling. Also because the Orioles are in a spot where they have a lot of guys that debuted that are still prospects that would be good candidates for this, right?
Right.
Like a Chase McDermott could easily be a guy that grabs a bullpen spot for them if he shows well. Obviously, Cade Povich did a lot of good things and graduated from prospect status already, but could be a guy that ends up grabbing, some innings here and there.
Yeah.
Um, Cade Stroud.
Yeah, I thought about maybe, but he wasn't wowing enough for me to make that bullpen because that bullpen's pretty decent and they get Bautista back.
Yeah, the numbers weren't great overall in terms of run prevention, but the numbers in terms of strikeouts were gnarly.
Yeah,
So I wonder, if something clicks in spring training in terms of the command and they say, hey, we want this strikeout specialist, just might as well just throw him in the big league bullpen and go from there.
sure.
Maybe, like maybe that can make sense. But he had a 5.44 ERA, right? He had a 6.8 in AAA, but he also struck out 60 in 41 innings. So like
Yeah.
Stroud could be an option just off of the hey, he looks sharp in spring training and
Right.
let's throw him into the fold. But like, is that the best
That's the
answer?
best answer. Yeah,
Or is
that
it
is the
Brandon
best
Young?
answer. I don't think it's Brandon Young because Brandon Young is Tomoyuki Sugano, is Dean Kramer. Like all of these guys are depth starters, and Trevor Rogers is already a guy that, would be getting that start. I would rather turn to Povich and McDermott before Brandon Young.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really hope they put McDermott in the bullpen there. to
Yeah.
be honest. Health wise, stuff wise, he can always get transitioned back into a starter. But this guy doesn't need to be wasting bullets and rotting in AAA.
No.
He's a winner. Again, that was a really awesome interview going into last year. Guy that just I don't know. Like I didn't really go in. I didn't have we didn't have any mutual friends with him at least, or like I didn't really have a perception of who he was as a person. So I normally I'll have an idea of the
Yeah.
guy. So I went in blank slate. So I don't want it to come off wrong of like, oh, he surprised me by how he's like, it wasn't that. It's just, I went in blank slate and I was like, holy crap, this guy is a really cerebral pitcher.
Yeah.
And it was cool to see that. I think there might be a subconscious bias of when a guy has a higher walk rate, we just assume that they're not like as cerebral and
Right.
like detail
Right.
oriented. He's extremely detail oriented and cerebral. He's just a big dude who throws hard and has stuff going in all different directions. But it was just so cool to really hear that guy's perspective. That's a guy I want on my team one way or another,
Yes.
just because he's a winner. So I think putting him in a relief role, he would settle in, could go multi innings, and help bolster that bullpen as well.
And I'll take it a step further. Why is Sir Anthony Dominguez better than a ticked up Chase McDermott? Like
I,
Bautista is, I think Bautista is the third best closer in baseball
mhm.
after Clase and Mason Miller, even off of Tommy John surgery. But then, like you've been trying to find a setup guy, and Cano has settled into that. But could you create a co-setup with Cano and Chase McDermott? I think his stuff is better than Dominguez. It's better
Yeah,
than Keegan Aiken. It's better than Gregory Soto. He
I
could
agree.
become one of your leverage arms by opening day.
I 100% agree. I love it. I hope they do it.
Yeah, I hope so too. So we have no good answer for you, although Chase McDermott made one start, so he's our quasi cop out answer. Tampa. It's interesting. After the Springs trade, they could use a starter if Boz doesn't look right, although I assume Boz is going to look right. You look at that starting rotation on paper and you really like it because it's McClanahan, Bradley, Pepio, who I think is going to have a massive season,
Mhm.
then Boz, then Littell. But after that, your six is probably the guy in Ian Seymour or Joe Rock. Those were the two names that jumped out to me. Both were added to the 40-man roster. My non 40 answer, though, your opening day center fielder as it stands right now is Johnny DeLuca. You've got Christopher Morel slated to play a corner outfield. If you want to mix and match a little bit, and Tampa, I don't think they're going to put, their chips in the middle of the table. But if they wanted to, and we talked about this. If they want their shot at the PPI pick, get 80 stolen bases in the big leagues. Like Chandler Simpson could be your opening day center fielder.
I could see it. I think he could absolutely do it. I wouldn't be shocked. I wonder if the Jake Mangum move was just to buy Chandler Simpson some time, right? They Mangum was added to the 40. I think that might have also just been because the Rays are smart and know that a lot of teams were looking in this Rule 5 draft. Seemed like a lot of teams were looking for defensive oriented players, like whether it be utility infield, like Christian Cairo getting picked by the
Yeah.
Braves, like who saw that coming? I think a Jake Mangum could have very easily been selected with just the speed defense side of things, and the fact that he's just put up solid enough numbers offensively. So they may have just wanted to protect him, knowing that hey, we can probably trade him for something,
Yeah.
during spring training. But I do think that there's a decent chance that Mangum ends up grabbing that fourth outfield spot out of the gate.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think he's earned that. Like I really do. Obviously, I want to see Chandler Simpson play. And we talked about it. Like he has a chance to get them that PPI pick because if some of the if Jackson Jobe is easing his way into things and it's always an offensive award. Like if he puts up WAR defensively and steals a ton of bags and like you and I were talking off air before, like you understandably were talking about, for the playing GM episode, like trading Yandy and Brandon Lowe. They very well could. To me, I'm just like, I can't wrap my head around that because it's like that offense would be putrid, but then they would need like dynamic speedsters, manufacture runs. That's how you would do it. Um, I think the low hanging fruit would be Mangum added to the 40, already there. But on the pitching side, I thought Ian Seymour would have been the perfect long man, and they take Mike Vassell in the Rule 5. I thought that
Weird.
was weird too. Or they didn't
I
take it.
thought
They
it was
traded
really
for
weird.
him after he was selected, right?
Yeah, Vassell was selected by Philly and then they purchased him from Philly, but they took Nate Lavender in the Rule 5, although Lavender I think is hurt, reliever that has pretty loud stuff. Like Lavender will be a bullpen piece for them at some point because they saw that. But um I thought that was such a weird acquisition because you have a couple of Vassals at home. Why
They
couldn't
must
Ian
see
Seymour
something.
or Trevor Martin be that guy? Like there are a couple guys that are like Vassell.
They must see something. I don't know what it is because you remember the conversations we were having about Mason Montgomery, and we're like,
Yeah.
is he a long man at this point? Like, what's it going to look like? They move him to the bullpen, and it was a small sample, but he looked good. So maybe
Yeah.
they feel like they can get something out of Vassell in this middle relief type of role. But now looking at the roster situation, I mean, they should consider a six-man rotation. We've talked about that with the Rays all the time.
Yeah.
Rasmussen's presumably, they always talked about moving him back into the rotation after this year, like
Yeah.
after 2024, moving him back in there. I don't know if that's still the plan, but where does Ian Seymour fit into this thing? Like, is he a reliever then? Like, is that a guy that you end up using as a reliever? Because I feel like that's just a guy who's best used as a starter. By the way, had a 2.35 ERA between 145 innings between Double A and Triple A.
Yeah.
Doesn't walk anybody. Like fills up the zone. Does pick up the strikeouts though, and just does seem to create difficult angles. But he's like a lower velocity, get you out with a bunch of different pitches kind of guy.
I like his value comes not necessarily in starts, but I think in 5 inning spurts. Like if
I
he
agree
can
with that.
bridge you, and I do think that there is an opportunity for that. I feel like Seymour's roster spot will be decided by where Drew Rasmussen is at.
Yeah.
If Rasmussen is a reliever, I could see Seymour making it, and you go with an opener, and then Seymour is a long man if they do go six. But
Ah.
if Rasmussen is ready to start games again, I think he could even start games over a Boz, and Littell could be an opener in a certain world. And then Seymour hangs out in Durham for a little bit until somebody goes down.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also wonder if they take this approach of like, hey, we've had so many pitchers get hurt all the time that like we just and I was thinking about the general like idea of roster construction and
Right.
starting pitching slash bullpen construction, how many spots you allocate towards. Of course, you have your normal rotation, but what if you had more guys within that bullpen that were capable of going long? But are also effective in short spurts. Like, could that help you a little bit more instead of having this shuttle from AAA? And it feels like the Rays might be doing a little bit of that, right? Rasmussen can be stretched out, Montgomery can be stretched out, Vassell can be stretched out. They've done the opener thing in the past, which we've seen plenty of as well. And I wonder just having another guy in there that, okay, when all things are going well, we're using you in a role where you're maybe not most valuable in Seymour and middle relief, but the second somebody goes down, we know that you're ready to go to potentially build back up and throw longer spurts and be stretched out a little bit more instead of just having guys burning their arms out in AAA as well and then just waiting for their name to be called when needed. It's just an interesting, approach to it, and I think the way that the Rays are putting together this bullpen, it feels like there's a little bit more importance on guys that can go longer, I think.
If you think this is a novel concept, Yusmero Petit was a guy in 2014. He threw 117 innings in 39 appearances, 12 of which starts. Like this existed. Where did the long man go? The long man disappeared
Yeah.
during COVID. I think it might have been a COVID casualty. But now, like nobody rosters long relievers anymore.
No.
Yusmero Petit logged seasons of 117 innings, 91 innings, 93 innings, 83 innings as a reliever. Now, granted, Petit appeared in 80 freaking games in 2019 with Oakland. That's insane. But I mean, we're talking about a thing that did exist until the mid 2010s and it just went away. So I do think that there's a roster spot for Seymour. I think if I were a GM and I were constructing a 26-man roster, you've got 13 pitching spots, right? I would be going with six leverage relievers, five in a starting rotation, and two starters that have been quote unquote relegated to the bullpen,
Yeah.
where they can be bulk men if games get out of hand. They can get 2 innings worth of work in, and they can start in a pinch.
Yeah. And I think, there might be some like pitching coaches or like philosophy on health in terms of like having more clear defined, patterns and roles for guys. I get that. But that's how I would approach it too, because
Yeah.
it just, we've gotten to the point, I think, why the long man has kind of become antiquated is these relievers, and it's a big reason why we have injuries the way that we do too, is like it's max effort, right? And even for
Right.
starters, it's max effort as long as you can go max effort. But some of these Rays relievers here are not guys that succeed off of max effort. They succeed off of funk and being weird and
Hmm.
just different. Like Mason Montgomery, it's not max effort. It's funky. And even in
Yep.
short spurts, that funky was still effective. And I think that's the cyclical nature that we talk about in baseball too, where
Yep.
the easiest way to find an effective reliever is okay, 98 fastball with good characteristics, 90-mile-an-hour slider. Those two will play. Let's go. Let it eat. But there's other ways where you can be unique, as we're seeing, and maybe at 92, 93 with the right characteristics, you can be an effective reliever that way as well. So I'm very excited to see how the Rays piece together this bullpen. But I
Yep.
think for like if I had to pick one that I felt most confident about, to be honest, I think it's Jake Mangum with the way that the Rays operate. I'm not saying it's
Yep.
the right decision, but with the way that the Rays operate with their prospects, you know how much they like to go station to station to station.
Hmm.
I think they'd rather have the extra year of a guy like Chandler Simpson, who's a guarantee to be a fourth outfielder, and
Yep.
they'd like to keep cheap.
Fair. So Mangum is a good shout there. I just feel like they could look at Richie Palacios and Mangum as one and the same, and they'll roster Palacios instead. So, for the sake of being different, I'll go with Ian Seymour, and they figure out the pitching situation.
I like it. By the way, real quick, if you have DeLuca and uh, Mangum in the outfield at the same time, obviously not the most exciting offensively. Not a lot of balls are going to fly or
No,
fall out there. That
no,
DeLuca, I think the defense was incredibly undersold as a prospect.
yeah.
Go look at the write ups and stuff. It's crazy. It was like, yeah, he could play a fine corner. This guy played a great center field. I know you were pounding the pavement on that.
He was just a freaky athlete, man. Like Outman wasn't when James Outman was coming up, people didn't understand how freakishly athletic he was, and DeLuca was just that. Again, he was just a level lower than James Outman. So I think people are going to really understand when DeLuca gets ample run that he is a twitchy, freaky athlete.
And that's why Jose Siri was good to go.
Exactly. Boston, Campbell.
Campbell or Roman?
I think they're going to take their time with Roman because there's a lot of traffic in that outfield right now. Duran's in left, Rafael is in center, Williers in right. If he can't play Roman in an outfield spot every day, I think he goes to Worcester. But David Hamilton is projected as the opening day second baseman right now. And I think David Hamilton is a good third middle infielder, but he's not an opening day second baseman. I feel like it's Campbell.
Campbell at this moment is the answer, I think. But, Jeff Passan just put out a piece on ESPN, just kind of updating situation on every team. They're still in on Bregman, but I love the way that Passan kind of summed it up. Like, they're not going to earn the benefit of the doubt. Like, they're telling us they're going to spend, they're telling us they're going to spend, but we ain't believing it until we're going to see it with these Red Sox over the last few years. I agree. There's no better fit for Bregman, I personally think, in
Yeah.
terms of like where he would hit well compared to the other teams that are in on him. And also, you look at the strikeout rates throughout this team, they would they sorely need a guy that's just going to consistently put the ball in play. And that's exactly what Bregman does. I hope they go that route. We'll have to wait and see. But this is such a left-handed heavy lineup as well.
Yeah.
Duran, Devers, Casas, Yoshida, Abreu, Hamilton. What's wild is you hear Casas' name dangled more than Wilyer Abreu's.
Yeah.
And I think that's weird. Even though I understand Casas is limited to first base, Wilyer is a good player, good defender. In terms of offensive upside, I don't think it's particularly close. And I understand
No.
Willier had a phenomenal year. He had a 3-1 F4. Tristan was hurt again. But in terms of offensive upside, like I would rather hold on to Casas and you have a trillion outfielders and more teams might have more interest in an Abreu who can play a good defensive outfield and play either corner and give you some speed and it seems like that's a need for a lot of teams more than first base, which teams just don't seem to value as much. So that's why I think it's really interesting that the Red Sox seem to be shopping Casas more. If that's the case though, even more of a reason to believe that it'll probably be an infield adjustment. And Campbell, like even if they signed a Bregman, that would mean they traded Casas. And I still think Christian Campbell probably makes the most sense as the guy to break camp.
Yeah, it's a weird puzzle, and if they do go get Bregman and they sign him, and what I read from Bob Nightingale was they're probably not going to sign Bregman, and he sharpied in Vlad Jr. to that Red Sox infield
Believe
next
it
year,
when I
which
see
is
it.
crazy. Yeah, I believe it when I see it too, because Vlad might get $400 million as a first baseman, and
Yeah, and John
we'll
Henry
see.
might vomit.
Yeah,
That's a
exactly. So
Liverpool forward. That's a really good forward over there.
Yeah, it might be two guys.
Yeah, that might be two.
You might get the second Jordan Henderson too. Soccer shout. You like that?
Yeah, I don't even know who
Um,
that is.
exactly. I think he was the captain for a little bit. But Trent might be on the move. Alexander Arnold, whatever. Um,
I know him. He's good.
yeah, he is good. But like all of a sudden you start doing that puzzle. If they do pony up and pay Bregman this year, that it's Bregman to third, you move Devers to first, Casas is expendable. And I'm with you, like that still creates the opening at second base. But then do you keep Casas and do you trade Wilyer and Yoshida? Like there are options here where Casas could just DH. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, and I
and
think nobody wants to take that Yoshida contract on, which really hampers them.
right, so
And
you package it with Casas or you package it with Wilyer. And if I were in their shoes, I would rather package it with Wilyer because you have a good DH in Casas.
no doubt. No doubt. And that's the way I would go about it too. And I'm curious what they're gonna do. I think how Von Grissom looks in spring training, he's a big part of this as well. If Grissom looks, this guy's a good player, man. He's 24 years old. He just turned 24. I really think he was derailed by injuries. This guy is not the player that we saw the last year and a half. He skipped his development in the minor leagues. He has succeeded through stretches at the big league level. If he looks really good, it's just another reason for them to take their time. But I do think that this is the one team that really should be looking at the PPI pick and saying we have a real shot to grab it there. But the upside of Roman and Christian Campbell is so immense that they might just say, I'll take the guaranteed extra year of control here and have a little bit more time to get some roster clarity. I could understand either side of it, neither on the 40. I think Christian Campbell is what he is, and you might as well see if it's going to work at the big league level. Whereas Roman Anthony, I actually do think could use another 150 plate appearances in AAA. Like as productive as he is, and we talked about it, like he wasn't hitting home runs, and he still was extremely productive on patience, drawing walks, and just hitting the ball hard. He could elevate a little bit more. That's definitely something that he needs to get more comfortable doing, and that would affect his game, I think, a little bit more at the big league level. So just getting more comfortable hitting the ball in the air consistently. Guys tend to see their ground ball rates go up in AAA if they have a track record of rolling over a little bit more because of the way pitchers are going to hit their spots and
Yeah.
generally just be more effective in that regard. I think he could use some more time there. Whereas again, Campbell, I think what you see is what you're going to get. And it's just a matter of whether it's all going to translate or not. And I think for
Yeah.
him, it's just going to getting acclimated at the big league level. I think with Roman, he could probably use a little bit more time. So I'll go with Christian Campbell as well. I like that pick. And then pitching wise, they don't really have a clear cut reliever that I would like throw into the fold there. I don't think.
No, and starting pitching wise, there's nobody there because if you need another starting pitcher, you go to a Priester who already has a couple seasons under his belt, or a Richard Fitz who already has a couple starts under his belt. Like there are options. They are a deep rotation with Crochet and Bueller now at the top of it.
Yep.
The other name that jumped out to me was Nathan Hickey, a catcher who was decent in Worcester last year. The backup catcher conversation now turns into Nathan Hickey versus Carlos Narvaez. And I don't know what the right answer is, but the answer could just be Hickey.
Yeah, I think Hickey is bat first, and I don't know what Narvaez is at this point. So,
Yeah.
like I'm not too tapped in on what he brings to the
On
table, but
Carlos Narvaez, you got to get dialed, man.
yeah, I gotta dial back in. But no, I think that's definitely an option as well. I think just I would probably prefer a little bit more defensive ability with how many power hitting lefties they have
Yeah.
throughout there, but nothing would surprise me as well. And Narvaez could just look rough and they end up going the other route.
Yeah. Last and least in the American League East is Toronto. I'm going to give you three names, and I want you to power rank them. Most likely to break camp to least likely to break camp. Josh Kasevich, an infielder. Alan Roden, the outfielder, Mason Fluharty, the reliever.
So reminder that this is players that have not yet got registered an at bat or an inning
Yeah.
in the big leagues. So we're going through players that, the obvious would be Elvis, right? Like that would be the guy that I think has the
Yeah.
best inside track. But I think Alan Roden is number one, because Roden's season that he had, first of all, incredibly impressive. Raked in double, raked in triple, brings some athleticism at least to the table. But what I like with Roden is he seems like the kind of guy that can at least make an impact right away. Like I'm not saying he's going to light it up, but he's going to give you good ABs. I think pretty consistently. His feel to hit. I think just the approach, like it's a sound offensive profile. It's floor over ceiling with a guy like him, but I do think with Roden, left-handed bat, that also you look at the roster situation where I don't think I don't think you're going to have Dalton Varsho ready for opening day. So
No, rotator cuff thing, right? Didn't he get
yeah,
rotator cuff surgery?
I believe so. So I think they were already saying it would be aggressive for him to be ready for opening day. Now, Roden is more of a center field and a pinch kind of guy. He's going to
Yeah.
play fine in either corner. But I just think they need an outfielder out there. We're talking about a guy that struck out 14% of the time.
Yeah.
He walks a ton, tapped into more power than he ever did last year. I think that this is probably the guy.
Yeah.
And Kasevich, great year. I just, unless they're subtracting from that infield situation, I think it's easier to see them wanting a little bit more reinforcement in the outfield with the expectation that Varsho is going to be hurt to start the year. Like right now, they're expected to roll with Nathan Lukes in the outfield, Joey Loperfido in the outfield, which I think they should. But I think you need a third option there, as both those guys are looking to get their footing at the big league level.
Yeah, and it turns into Roden versus Jonathan Clase, and Clase I think is a fourth outfielder at this point. Like I do think that you can roster both Roden and Clase. Kasevich, it doesn't make any sense to put him on the bench when you still have Bichette at short. I'm with you. It would need to be subtraction to clear runway for Kasevich, and they're not going to do that. So Kasevich for me was a distant three. Fluharty was a 1B to Roden's 1A, just because, reliever and a good one in the upper levels last year, you have an opportunity to make it if you look decent enough in spring. So, yeah, Fluharty's like he's interesting, but Roden is certainly the sexiest piece here that could very well be on the roster.
The relievers are always the safest answer too, so I think
Yeah,
Fluharty could
always.
be right there as well. I don't think that would be surprising at all. I think if Connor Cook had a really rough year, but
Yeah,
and if he shows a little bit better and bounces back, I think that's a guy whose stuff like speaks for itself. They could easily just say, you know what, we're going to throw you in there and see how it goes. But Fluharty might be the safest answer just because you look at the bullpen right now.
right.
They need bodies. He
Yeah,
struck out 76 and 67 innings in
yeah.
AAA last year. Fluharty did. I mean that's probably a guy that bolsters their bullpen immediately. So I would say 1A, 1B, Roden, Fluharty. I think you could maybe lean towards Fluharty just because of what you said in the roster situation, where like I think there's a very obvious case that Fluharty's an upgrade over a couple of the bullpen arms that they're slated to maybe roll with next
Right.
year. Whereas, I think the Blue Jays could say, hey, we want to see a little bit more out of Jonathan Clase. Hey, we know Davis Schneider can still play corner outfield. Nathan Luke showed well enough where we feel decent with him. And Loperfido,
Yeah,
we traded, he was a key piece in a return for us. We want to get him consistent run. And they
yeah.
say, you know what? We'll let Roden, get acclimated in AAA a little bit more. So I might go Fluharty 1A,
Okay.
Roden 1B, and then Kasevich at 2, just
Yeah.
because I also really like Leo Jimenez. I think Jimenez can be a very solid utility piece, and thought he showed pretty well in his big league debut.
I thought so too. By the way, you mentioned Loperfido trade. He was in that Kikuchi deal. Did you see the photo of Kikuchi passed out drunk on Yu Darvish's floor?
Yeah, you Darvish did him dirty with that.
Yeah, it was crazy.
By the way, on Joey Loperfido, you have a chance to pull his
Mhm.
his debut, or not pull. You have a chance to win his debut patch. Really cool thing that he's doing. And all the proceeds go to the Miracle League and one other charity. I didn't have it planned to mention on the show. It now just came up, so I want to plug it. All of the link in the episode description. $25 raffle ticket goes to a pair of great causes. and
Yeah.
Joey partnered with the person I believe who pulled it or was able to buy it. I don't understand how it all worked, but really cool thing that they worked out where you can win his debut patch one of one Topps update card, which is the most coveted type of card in the hobby. And all you have to do is buy a raffle ticket. The raffle ticket goes to a good cause either way, and
Yeah.
that's a way better chance of instead of opening a box of Bowman or a box of Tops, excuse me, and hoping you pull a debut patch is a way higher probability. And if
For
you
sure.
don't win, your money goes to charity. So I'll link to that raffle. Should be ending in the next couple of days in the episode description for you to check it out.
Love it. We're going to get to the American League Central in a moment. Before that, quick break. American League Central, let's start with the division winning Cleveland Guardians. Easy. DeLauder and then who? There are a couple other guys. Juan Brito, I think, is a slam dunk to make this team. There's a reliever as well, but I want to start with the two bats here. DeLauder, Brito, who is more likely?
Ooh, Delauder Burrito. I think Burrito just off of need. But it also depends. If they trade Lane Thomas, then I think you got a 1A, 1B situation here. But Burrito seems like the most likely scenario with the trade of Andres Jimenez. And with the outfield situated with Quan, you have Will Brennan for now, and then Lane Thomas, again, if they hold on to him, with Noel is also just ready to go in a corner, and Daniel Schneemann. It feels like it's a little bit more dire in the infield.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Gabriel Arias, I think what you see is kind of what you get there. You'd rather him be a bench guy, where Juan Brito could be a better option. Obviously, DeLauder could end up being one of your best hitters, but he also could use some time if you want. And given that he was banged up last year, they may want to ease him into his big league debut. But if he does what he did in spring training last year, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he forces the Guardians' hand and gets a chance to break camp. But I think to your point, Brito seems like the safest pick.
I mean, it feels like Brito is already, as soon as they moved Jimenez, like, okay, it's Juan Brito's time. And Brito was awesome last year in AAA. And I don't know what the WRC Plus says about Juan Brito. Like, I'm sure it was, in the 115 to 120 range or something like that. Might have been even lower because the OPS was not as high as you would expect. But this guy, it was like 40 doubles last year in AAA. I mean, he used that bandbox to his advantage. And I think that this guy is gap to gap. He's got experience at third. They don't need it at third. He's got experience at first as well. They don't need it at first. I think he can just play second base every day.
He fits the Guardians mold, right? At 113 WRC plus to be exact, which is
Yeah.
still, really solid number. 21 homers. You mentioned using the bandbox to his advantage, but I think he also hit the ball harder, and that was something that helped him. And he walks, doesn't K. I think
He's a strong human being. You mentioned hit the ball harder. Like I was floored when I saw him on field.
and elevating. And so like I think the Guardians maybe feel pretty confident that he can start to tap into a little bit more juice. His average EV in AAA was 88 miles per hour. That's more than enough with his swing
Yeah.
decisions and with the way he's able to now hit the ball at desired angles. He gets into the pull side a little bit. I think he's a guy that doesn't really have anything else to show. Whereas DeLauder, you could make the case, could just use a little bit more seasoning and again
Yeah.
ease his way in instead of just throwing him right into fight or flight. See if he can stay healthy and then bring him up, as you get a little bit more roster clarity as well with the big league situation. But if Will Brennan is struggling,
Yeah.
without a doubt, then it's a no brainer. You got DeLauder ready to go, and he'll be an upgrade.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how it all, shakes out with them. And I have no idea what it's going to look like on opening day because you assume it's what Manzardo at first, Noel DHing, and then you're running out. Like if they trade Lane Thomas, I think it's Brennan in center and DeLauder in right. And you mentioned what he did last spring. Like the baseball world was whipped into a frenzy last spring when he
Yeah,
did this, and now we're a year removed from that, so we're a year overdue for that DeLauder debut. Even if he only plays 60 games, why not just have those 60 games in the big leagues? And again, that swing, I know Campbell's swing makes zero sense to you. DeLauder's swing makes zero sense to me, but somehow it really works, and I would love to just see it happen in the big leagues, and enough success will help me, shut myself up.
yeah, no, I get it. I will buy the water swing any day of the week opposed to the Campbell, but I hope they both work.
Yeah.
They both look incredibly unique. And there's going to be some challenges that come with it though, with DeLauder's moves though, that I do think he will only be able to really figure out how limited, if at all, he will be by the way he moves in the box at the big league level, similar to Christian Campbell. So I think that makes a lot of sense. The only guy that could get in the way is Angel Martinez, I think, for Brito. But I even at that point, I think if both have a great spring, or even if Martinez has a great spring and Brito has a mediocre spring, I would still think Brito needs to be on that team. He has one option left.
Yeah.
I'd rather trade a Gabriel Arias who has no options left. And I'm sure there's a team out there, a rebuilding team that would take a shot on him. I
No
think at
doubt.
that point, I'd rather do that than burn the last option for Juan Brito.
I'm totally with you. The reliever that jumped out to me, Franco Alaman, they added to the 40-man roster. That bullpen is the best in baseball, and they're, back end of the bullpen option. And I'm not talking ninth inning. I'm talking like break glass in case of emergency. Use this guy. Pedro Avila looked awesome last year at the end of the regular season and the postseason. They are as deep as they come. And we talk about the top end talent with Clase and Gaddis and Cade Smith and Heron. I mean, Sabrowski and Walters factoring in there is disgusting. But Alleman is another guy who is a very good reliever, and I think could be a good big league reliever that might just end up in Columbus because they run out of room.
I think with him being on the 40 man, he's got a shot, and that fastball is overwhelming. It's 94, but he's flashed higher than that. Like when he's feeling 100%, you'll see him
Yeah.
closer to 96, 97. But crazy ride on the four seamer, and I think it just creates a really difficult at bat for hitters. He's going to be a good reliever.
Yeah. Kansas City, I had Noah Cameron written down, and then they signed Michael Lorenzen. So no Noah Cameron anymore. Cam Devaney or Javier Vaz, question mark? Eric Cerantola, exclamation point. Cerantola is a reliever that has a fastball slider combo that I think will be in that bullpen, and there's no point in not having him there anymore. He's also on the 40 man now. Um, I would probably let Vaz hang out in Omaha and get everyday reps and just get Devaney up. Devaney's 27 years old, 28 years old, and you're getting good shortstop defense from him if Witt goes down, or second base or third base, wherever you may need him.
Yeah, Devaney's a fun utility guy. I've seen him in stretches where I thought he for sure looked like a big league utility piece, and then there's been stretches where he's struggled a little bit. And but I thought last year, I mean, kind of what you saw was what you get, and it was a well-rounded season, slightly above average offensively, but he'll run into some power, and like you said, he can pick it. And I think when you're looking at a Nick Lofton, I think lacks a little bit of the defensive impact that Devaney has. Where yeah, Lofton's versatile, but I don't think he's not going to be able to play a good shortstop.
Right.
He's more of a fill in, and get by at all these different spots. He really struggled offensively. He still has two options. I could see it being an open competition for them for that role in opening day on the bench or something along those lines,
Yeah.
and potentially being able to unseat Lofton from there. I think Devaney is definitely a great answer. I had Noah Cameron as well,
Yeah.
and now it's tough because it would have to be in a relief role, which I just don't see. He's
Doesn't
another
make He
guy
has no
that's
value as a reliever.
he's most enjoyed over a larger
Yeah.
sample. I 100% agree. So it seems like that's probably the best bet at this point. And I'm looking at their infield situation. Like, there's a pretty direct path to like, if Michael Garcia is struggling, Devaney could end up cutting into those ABs, assuming that the Royals don't add anybody else into the infield. Devaney
Yeah.
may end up being just a better option offensively, and
Yeah.
and wouldn't shock me because at least he can run into some home runs and give you a little bit of that versatility as well.
Do you agree Vaz not yet?
Not yet. I thought he did a lot of good things. We talked about this farm system. It's a guy
Yeah.
that I think we're a little bit higher on in terms of the rankings than some other outlets, but probably not yet.
Yeah.
I'm trying like it was a good finish to the year. I think there's still a little bit more clarity they want on the defensive side of things. Like, is he going to play it all in left? Is it going to
Yeah.
predominantly be second base? He played the entirety in double A last year. I think he could benefit from just getting more reps and defensively and play a little triple A.
For sure. And then Sarantola, like easy bullpen fit. It's just another reliever that you could add to the fold. That's my hard hitting analysis on Eric Sarantola's roster fit on opening day.
Yeah, and they could just use more relievers, right? And he's already on the
Yeah.
40, so
Yeah.
Sarantola makes sense. And then Evan Sisk, funky lefty,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Could also be in the fold there. But Sarantola struck out a ton of batters last year.
Tons.
101 and 72 and two thirds. He's got to be the favorite to crack that roster, I think.
I
He's
would
got to
think
be
so.
number one, then Devaney.
Yeah, I would think so. Detroit, I didn't have a good answer for you because everybody got up at the end of last year, from Job to Jace Young to like every single person, Trey Sweeney, every single person that could have been a candidate got up at the end of last year, and they were a piece on that postseason roster. Tyler Owens was my answer here. I would love to say Madison, but Madison should be ready to go in double A or triple A on opening day, but he needs to build back up from missing the entirety of 2024. Tyler Owens is my answer, and I don't feel good about it at all.
Yeah, that this is just a team that they auditioned so many different guys and put so many different players into the fold that it just doesn't leave us with many options here to be able to pick somebody that has not yet debuted.
Yeah.
Uh, that's probably the best answer
I
with
don't
the
think
way
there's a
that
good
they've
answer.
approached things. Like it's Tyler Owens or it's Chase Lee.
I'm
Chase
good.
Lee's a guy that they acquired from the Rangers, I think at the deadline. Uh, Put up some pretty good numbers in AAA last year between both organizations and just overall in the minor leagues last season. 36 innings at the AAA level, aside from a couple innings at the complex. 2.75 ERA. He struck out 49 and walked just 11. So that could be a guy that grabs onto a bullpen spot, but doesn't throw hard at all. It's more
Yeah.
of like unusual looks and funk that allows him to be successful. But I think with the bullpen chaos and the way that they like to go about it, I could see him being an option. And again, I think they added him to the 40 man after that trade to protect him. I guess they thought he could get traded. So that's a guy that with a little bit more experience, I think at the AAA level, could see Chase Lee being an option as well.
Yep. Minnesota, I would have loved to have said Andrew Morris, but he's non 40, so it's not going to be him. The funny answer, and I think the best answer for me when looking at this, like Emmanuel Rodriguez is not making this team out of
Which
camp. I
sucks
really do.
because he should be ready.
Yeah.
Like he played 30 games again last year.
Yeah. I need him to play.
He's right. I talked about in the bonus call up episode. Like he's one of the most difficult prospects for me to rank because on sheer ability, I think he's slam dunk top 10 prospect in the game. I think you can
Wow.
make a case top five prospect in the game. But
Wow.
the injury trend is just too significant at this point to overlook.
Everybody. Royce, Brooks, Rodriguez. We'll see if Jenkins can stay healthy in 2025. They're pissing me off. This
Yep.
situation is really upsetting. But Emmanuel Rodriguez, he should be ready. He won't be ready. Mickey Gasper is a fair name here, but the funny and I think right name is Peyton Eels, the
Oh,
guy that was amazing from what low A to high A to double A to triple A last year, signed out of Indy Ball. He's 25 years old, and it's going to come down to Eels versus Michael Hellman. Is Julien going to get everyday ABs? If not, you send him to St. Paul again. Like, you need him hitting every day. Eels is a guy that you plucked out of Indy Ball. You don't need that guy hitting every day. He was a Chicago Dog last year, and now he could be a Minnesota Twin. I think he can absolutely outperform Michael Hellman or Austin Martin, or the situation with Edouard Julien could create a bench spot for him.
can we have a sit down like sometime this before the season starts with Eels for like an hour?
I hope so. Yeah,
Uh,
I'll try and get something.
like those are the stories that like there's no player interview I get more excited about than like a Peyton Neal's like, type of conversation. What a story, and you know that it's going to be and it should be told a ton when he does get that big league debut, which I agree it could come out of camp because if Edouard Julien is not in the fold for them, especially Eels is a left-handed bat for them as well. That you look at the lineup, it's switch hitter, right, left, and then right, switch hitter. And even like Brooks Lee, I'd want a better insurance policy for Brooks Lee, in terms of a speedster that can slap the ball around and do some things. Like I would want as many higher floor infield versatile type guys on my bench as possible with
Yeah.
the way that this roster is situated. And I think that he could absolutely beat out a Michael Hellman. So I think Yields is the answer on the offensive side. And then on the pitching side, probably a Travis Adams.
Maybe. Did you see how many starting pitchers they have on the 40-man roster?
That's why I feel like they're going to move. They're going to move Pablo, right? Or Ober or somebody.
Yeah, I think they're going to move Paddock. Like I feel like they just view him as excess. Like Zebby Matthews is slated to go to AAA at this point. Why?
And they're probably going to trim some payroll too, right?
They're going to trim some payroll. Paddock is some payroll. Like I would love to see them get Zebby and Festa in the opening day rotation. And right now, there's no space for him.
I think Festa's going to make a leap this year too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean Paddock's due for 7.5. Yeah,
Yeah. Like if they can move him for a DSL prospect, I think they do it at this
yeah,
point.
no doubt. And Iverson Castellano, the Rule 5 guy, I think is going to fill in nicely as a long man and can also spot start. So there's really no need for Paddock.
No, I don't think so. So we'll see. I don't think there's a good pitching option, and the best option that I could pluck offensively was Eels.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that though.
White Sox. I thought Colson could have been a candidate, but Colson I think is going to play third base every day in Charlotte, and Josh Rojas. It's so weird to say that the signing of Josh Rojas negates the possibility of Colson Montgomery being on the big league roster. I wonder if either of the catchers are good enough to make it, but I would like they just traded for Matt Tice. I think they're just going to roster him and Corey Lee until both of them can come up at the same time. And my working theory, and I shared this with our king Elijah Evans, is that they figure out the timeshare in AAA, and then they bring him up at the same time, and they do the identical timeshare in the big leagues with Teal and Carroll because I think they're
That
both going to catch.
that would be interesting. I think my argument would be, and they might just do that and get used to the pattern and sequencing of that playing time wise and working off each other. But I was thinking almost Caro did everything you wanted to see last year, right?
Yeah,
Made a mechanical adjustment from both sides of the plate, tapped into more power, continued to hit. You know that the plate discipline's never going to be a question. The defenses continue to come along. He looks big league ready to me. Whereas Kyle Teal, the defense needs to come along, and I honestly think he could get a little bit more comfortable in terms of tapping into game power more consistently, but predominantly the defense. Caro could be up at the big league level, getting the lead reps there, and then Teal
yeah,
could be catching as much as possible to
in
just
Charlotte.
get as
Yeah,
many defensive reps as possible as well too. I could see them going either way, but if I were in charge, I'd want Caro breaking camp. I don't see any need of him hitting in Charlotte anymore, and I honestly would want him to start working with some of these pitchers now at the big league level, and they're going to keep jumping up there too. You're going to see a lot more coming up soon.
yeah, I'm totally with you. So I do think that that probably makes more sense where you get both guys everyday reps and one just comes to the big leagues. But that was my weird like conspiracy tinfoil hat thing. I was like, they're gonna figure this out, and then they're gonna coexist in AAA, and they're gonna be the best of buddies, and then they're gonna get up to the big leagues and be the best of buddies forever and ever.
Project Charlotte.
Project Charlotte. I think the slam dunk answer, even more so than Caro, is Chase Mydroth. Mydroth was so good in AAA last year. It was a near 440 on base. You want Mydroth playing, or you want Lenine Sosa and Brooks Baldwin and Brian Ramos playing, and Jacob
Mydroth,
Amaya on your bench? Like, give me
yeah,
Mydroth, man.
Mydroth. I agree. Like also like you're hoping that Brooks Baldwin hits like Mydroth does. Like
Yeah,
you're praying for that. I think Lenine Sosa. I still believe in Lenine Sosa to be honest, I haven't compared the defensive ability too much between him and Brooks Baldwin, but I think Lenine has a little bit more going for him tools wise. Um, I think Mydroth. It would be silly to put that guy in triple. He's gonna fall asleep at the plate. Like there's nothing left for him to do. It's too easy.
if he
So
falls asleep, he'll still get on base at a 400.
so I agree. But I agree Colson should be in AAA. I think Mydroth is definitely the answer.
Cool. Yeah. So Mydroth, and then your team Caro. I'm team tinfoil hat, but we'll see what they do. We're going to get to the American League West to wrap in a moment, but before that, one more quick break. All right, American League West. Actually, before we get to the American League West, real quick on the White Sox, Schultz. What do you do with him? Repeat
I
eligible?
I think I'm going to start just using this reference all the time now. I think an even more subdued, uh, like Paul Skeens rollout, but even more like
Do you do that in Birmingham or Charlotte?
I think Charlotte and tell him I don't give a shit about results, right? Like, oh no, somebody hit a 325-foot home run. Who cares? You're 6'9" and disgusting, and you get ground balls. I don't even think it'll be a problem.
Yeah.
Still don't think anyone's going to hit home runs against him. So it doesn't really matter. I'd almost rather him deal with that a
Okay.
little bit, like deal with it a little bit instead of just pitching in the Southern League. And I'd want him throwing to Kyle Teal and maybe Edgar Caro. So I think you put him in Charlotte,
Okay.
and I know that they don't love to do that. Who cares?
Who cares?
He's throwing bullpens out there as far as I'm concerned. Nobody out there is going to beat him other than himself. He has the potential to be one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. Obviously, he's not perfect, but you know what I mean. Like the development is to be had with him. His opponents don't matter that much. Neither does the environment. I just want to see Noah Schultz
Yeah.
mature on the mound.
Okay. So your team Charlotte. I'm team put him back in Birmingham. Hagen Smith goes to Birmingham, and you have
Mm,
Schultz and Hagen Smith together,
that is
and they
fun.
could come up at the same time.
That is fun. I could see that too, right? Like a month or two in Birmingham. Neither need to be there longer than that. They come
No.
up together.
Yeah. So that's my again, that's my second tinfoil hat conspiracy with my childhood team. All right, American League West. Let's start with Houston. Houston needs an outfielder.
Hmm.
Is it free agency or is it Jacob Melton?
It should be free agency, but you know what? I mean, Melton is tooled up, and there might just be enough there to where he's hitting the ball hard enough. His speed, the defense can play all three, where they feel okay with bringing him up there. It was not a great year for him. Wasn't terrible by any means, right? But still hit 15 home runs and stole 30 bags between double and triple. But he slowed down in triple. So I think he would need to show that he's hitting the ball in the air consistently. I think he'd need to show that, he looks like he's comfortable. But if you put him up there and he's only facing righties and, whatever it may be, a strong spring training, I think he could break
Yeah.
camp. But he still just seems like he's not a year off, but like a half year off.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking I would rather throw a random a 1 year deal than rush Melton up there prematurely.
Yeah.
So,
DeZenzo has been playing some left field. Like you
okay, there
maybe
you
like
go.
he could play left field in the Crawford boxes. Like that guy had a really nice winter league. I think he's a little bit more ready offensively.
Yeah.
I'd
And
probably rather
I'd
do
rather
that.
give Trammell reps than rush Jacob Melton.
I agree because Melton has the potential to be a monster, and you could kind of throw him into a tough situation there where you're stunting his development a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that the heavy favorite though has to be pitching side of things.
Yes.
Is it Colton Gordon or Ryan Gusto?
Okay, so I was thinking Blue Baw, if Blue Baw was
Oh,
good
sorry,
for a
Blue
trade.
Ball. That was also a name for me.
So I came down to Colton Gordon and AJ Bluebaugh. I looked at their big league situation and I thought, are they going to need a starting pitcher? Like I think Wisniewski is going to be their five starter on opening day, but they could have Wisniewski in the bullpen as that hybrid and go to Colton Gordon or Bluebaugh as the five.
I kind of like that. I think I like Wisniewski throwing harder and shorter spurts
Same.
in a hybrid spot start short if you need him to. But Gordon already on the 40. Their 40 is a little tight. Left-handed arm too. That I mean, right now they're only lefties for Amber, and then you can always move Colton into that longer relief role. I think Colton Gordon is the choice there, and he was good, man. That's a guy that in this system it's kind of easy to stand out. Especially there was a point in time pitching wise where it was slim pickings, and I think when we
Yeah.
did the Astros a couple years back, I was like, "There's one guy here that might be interesting. It's Colton Gordon," and he has continued to put up good numbers in tough environments, and I I think what he did last year in terms of building up innings wise, 123 innings.
Yeah.
Also, I think he's a guy that, as a lefty, could be effective in relief if you ever wanted to swing him back into that. But
Mhm.
I like Colton Gordon. I think that's a great shout.
Gordon spent the entirety of the year in Sugarland, I think,
Yep.
and Bluebaugh, I feel like it was a couple starts in double and then the most part in triple.
Blue ball is really good as well. If he was on the 40, I I think you could say it's wide open. But I think with
Yeah,
how tight things are already
yeah,
with the Astros, I mean, obviously, if Foucault is dominating and Colton Gordon doesn't look good, they could find a way. They could add somebody to the 60 day or
sure.
you know find create an opening one way or another. But I think Colton Gordon makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Yeah, let's go with Colton Gordon. There wasn't a reliever that jumped out to me, and damn shame Pedro Leon got what 10 ABs or something last
Yeah,
year.
that would have been the answer. And
I've been on
Leone will
that
probably
guy.
get an opportunity to try to win a job
I hope so, man. Like I've been on that guy for 4 years, and he's been good in AAA. It feels
somehow.
like every year until this year, and then he
Yeah.
was like, and then he got to the big leagues and looked so overmatched.
Yeah.
What happened to you?
Jose Siri Light.
Yeah, but maybe a better arm, which is crazy because Siri has like one of the best arms you've ever seen. So tooled out. All you got to do is make contact. Seattle. I don't think Logan Evans is making the team.
Mm-mm.
I don't have a good answer here. If they do nothing to address the infield, I read that Dipoto really likes Ben Williamson, and that could be the reach. But
Wow.
man, is this bleak.
That that'd be a wild move. Just to I think Williamson would be fine. He's a great defender in terms of how he can move around the infield. But man, I mean, if you think the offense, if you wanted to upgrade the offense, I don't know if that's really an area where he would be helping you too much there, especially making that
Right.
leap with the lack of impact and everything as well.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they played him in short a good bit. Like he's versatile, and JP Crawford's been hurt, and you want a guy that you could probably move around the infield. Like I think he's going to play
Right.
probably even a better short than Ryan Bliss. So that aspect of it definitely makes it interesting. But man, it can't get to that, can it?
No,
Is
I
that where
don't
we're
think
going to
so.
be?
It shouldn't get to that. I mean, they could win a World Series if they got to the postseason because they have the best pitching rotation I've ever seen.
Yeah. So no Logan Evans, just because that you bring him up when you need a starter,
Yeah.
and then bats wise, yeah, it's
Everybody's already played
I
him.
loved picking up Shenson. I think that was a great upside play.
Yeah.
Bring him home. Locklear is
Already
already
played.
got some run and probably should be on that roster. Might as well see what he can do.
Yeah.
Most
Didn't
of the other
Bliss
guys
already
have
get
already
some run?
who?
Ryan Bliss. I think Bliss already got some run at the end of the year, right?
Yeah, yeah, he's already played. There's not a lot of guys that have not yet played.
I know.
So I would say it's Williamson, or is there like an arm that is there a Brandon Garcia?
You
If
think so?
they don't like throwing guys into AAA, Garcia threw well in double. Lefty can kind of move in different roles. The rotation is all righty. Their only lefty relievers are Gabe Spire and Tyler Sosetto. We talked about Brandon Garcia, top 15 prospect for us at just baseball. He's weird in a good way. Uh, I think Brandon Garcia could be the guy.
Okay.
I'm
That
trying to, I don't know
it's a
if I can,
better option than Ben Williamson. We're grasping at straws right now.
but I mean, we're talking about a lefty with a plus slider and a fastball that's above average for us and put up great
Yeah.
numbers and gets contact on the ground. I mean, I think if he has a good spring, throw him into the bullpen.
I dig it. All right. That's our answer. Brandon Garcia. I have no other good answer with them. Couple more teams. Texas. I want them to make a decision on Emiliano Teodo. Do they
Hmm.
want him in AAA or do they want him to turn into an awesome setup guy? Because I'm really excited if Teodo makes the move to the bullpen. I'm excited if he, goes to AAA and starts and looks awesome because I think he can be a good big league starter, but you're running out of space with the guys that you're paying a lot of money to at the top of that rotation, and then Rocker and Leiter. Teodo doesn't make that team. But if he does transition to that relief role during spring training, I think Teodo could make that team. But the slam dunk answer is a guy that they actually signed to a major league deal. Luis Curvelo. Have you heard this name before?
No.
They signed him to an MLB deal. Curvelo last year, I think he elected free agency after his year in Double A Arkansas. 66 and two thirds, 78 Ks, 18 walks, and he had a 2.57 ERA.
Wow.
So Curvelo was a very good reliever in Double A with Seattle. He hit minor league free agency and he signed a big league deal.
Hey, you can earn your way up there, man. That's rare though. You don't see that often. There
Yeah,
must have been a lot of teams hot on his trail. And it makes sense. 78 punchies and 18 walks in double A is pretty damn good.
right. And this happened quick. They signed him to a big league deal on November 13th. Like that's really fast.
So that's an easy, obvious answer.
Yeah,
Because he's technically already
slam
on the
dunk.
team essentially. Um, but then I would go again, Foscue already debuted and it was rough.
Dustin Harris already debuted.
It's got to be Teodo, and I think this team it's not World Series or bust because they have a good young core and in terms of Langford and Carter and Josh Young, but you signed Jock Peterson, you have Jacob DeGrom, you brought back Eovaldi, you brought back you just paid Chris Martin to on a retirement deal here to grab a bullpen spot, which I love. By the way, taking advantage of a homecoming there as well. But this bullpen needs more. Like, yeah, you got Robert Garcia in that Nate Lowe trade, but it also shows you, I think, how much they feel like they need to address the bullpen. I think still looking at that, Chris Young's going to say, hey, we can still make Toyota a starter later on, but
Yeah,
this is a team that we need to make the playoffs, both from a financial perspective as well too. Like they need to make a run in the playoffs because any of the teams that said, oh, we're up against it financially and then actually spent, which I love,
yeah,
there's even more win now pressure because that's how you recoup a lot of that money in the short term is
right.
making that playoff run and of
Winning.
course
Yeah,
filling seats throughout the regular season. Teodo in that bullpen, like that changes the look for them
yeah.
right away. And he's already on the 40, I believe.
I
Yeah,
think
he
so.
is.
Yeah,
Throw him in that bullpen. He could be an elite high leverage reliever tomorrow.
I love it. Yeah. I'm excited to see what they do at the beginning of spring training because they have to show their hand. They have to try him in a relief role. And obviously, relief innings don't matter for prospects in spring training in the first 2 to 3 weeks of spring training. But if we get into the March 15 to 20 range and we see him throwing in the sixth inning, that could mean something. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a slow burn. We'll have to, peek into what Chris Young is thinking about it. And I'm sure he'll be asked plenty about it by the great beat writers in Texas. But man, it is going to be fascinating to see how they operate with Toyota.
I got to see him in short spurts in Arizona a couple years ago in the fall league. I mean, he didn't give up a run, I don't think, in the fall league regular season. So, I mean, it's comical in those short spurts.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Oakland or the A's, Sacramento. They added Gunnar Hoglund and Ryan Cusick to their 40-man rosters. I feel like that is an easy answer there.
Mhm.
Hoglund or Cusick makes it as a depth starter or a long man. But two position players that I want to ask you about. Max Muncy, is there a space for him on opening day or no?
Max, that was going to be a name I was going to throw out. I think there could be, man. Like, I know they signed Gio Urshela,
Yeah.
and I know they have Zach Geloff, but man, I mean, I just think that there's not much for him to show in AAA. He looked really good at the end of the year. Maybe they want to see him be healthy and ease him in and give Geloff a little bit more time to try to bounce back because even with the bad year, like he's a good defender and he's going to run into some home runs. But I don't know. I think he's a better option than Geloff, and this is a team that wants to be competitive this year. Muncie's their first round pick. Like I think he could break camp, dude. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And I felt like Urshela was signed more as like an insurance policy,
I
right?
felt
And
like
and
his signing impacted Daryl Ornias. Like I feel like he decided that Ornias was going to go to Vegas.
I agree with that. And I think he was more of a placeholder and said, Muncie, like you don't need to reach very high to remove him, but like you need to reach, right? Like so, like
Yeah,
we're not just gonna hand it to you, but
right.
you don't have to do anything crazy, right? I think I would make it as simple as this. If you look at what Max Muncy does in spring training and after how he finished the year, and again, we ranked him higher, I think, in the A's update that we did than a lot of the industry because I really loved what I saw from him swing adjustment wise at the end of the year and batted ball data was strong and the numbers followed with it. If you look at Max Muncy in spring training and say this guy will be better than a 650 OPS, boom. That's what Gio Urshela was last year. Like done.
Yeah.
Let's put him at third base and let's put him at second and put Geloff at third and let's see how things go.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So Muncy was the first one that came to mind for me when it came to hitters. The other one, and he's non-40 right now, but Colby Thomas. Denzel Clark had to be added to the 40. Denzel Clark is not ready for the big leagues. He hasn't had a plate appearance in Las
No.
Vegas yet, but Colby Thomas was very good in Las Vegas, and he was a run producer, and he showed off those tools. Do they need outfield depth? I think Colby Thomas could be that guy.
And I mean, yeah, how much run are we going to give Seth Brown? I think if Seth Brown in the spring looks continues to look diminished from what he was in 21 and 22, I think you probably proactively make that move. I mean, he
Yep.
cost 2.6 million in ARB. I don't know if somebody will pick him up or not. But the defense being what it is at this point, which is not great, and a Kobe Thomas, I can go get it a little bit at least. He's a good athlete and just adds to that young, dynamic, athletic aspect of this team.
Yep.
I agree, and if they have Kobe Thomas up there and they have Max Muncy up there, I'm going to be watching a lot of Sacramento games.
Cool.
Like this is a really fun young team.
No doubt, man. And like I'd be excited even if they didn't. And I
Yeah.
have to stomach some Gio Urshela ABs. I'm watching because of Jacob Wilson and Lawrence Butler and Langoliers and Soderstrom. I'm watching for all these guys anyways, and that could only enhance the product. And I will tune into the first Sevy start. I want to see how that goes.
Oh, no doubt.
Um, Last but not least is LA. Because and I say not least because Christian Moore is the slam dunk, but I feel like there are a couple other good options too.
Yeah, and I think there could be just as crazy as it is, like maybe the Angels will be a little bit careful for once. Not saying he's not going to get up next year. He's definitely going to.
Yeah.
But coming off of the knee issue, I mean, hey, maybe they want to ease him into action a little bit, not just throw him into, such an intense situation where he's playing big league second base. Um, but I think if you want to talk about guys from that draft class, though, I think both the relievers could get thrown into the fold there. Chris Cortez could easily be thrown right into
Yeah.
the fold to make his MLB debut, I think, for that ball club. Or, Ryan Johnson easily could as well. Two high octane relievers that they took early, I think, for the full sole sake of being able to fast track. But Sammy Natera should have the inside track there after what
Yeah.
we just saw from him in the Arizona Fall League. And that should
Yeah.
be enough for the Angels. I understand that he's only thrown at his 7 innings at the Double A level, and he only threw 15 innings in High A last year. That's never deterred
No.
the Angels. He was arguably the most impressive pitcher, not named
Painter.
not named Andrew Painter in the Arizona Fall League as a lefty who can be the Swiss Army knife for you. And I think just be another piece in that bullpen that they could really use.
Yeah.
I don't I don't think Manassian and Artie Moreno are going to be comfortable wasting Sammy Natera bullets in the minor leagues.
No, I don't think so. I think Natera is a great shout. The other name that jumped out to me was a reliever they took in 23, Cam Minacci, the Wake kid. I
Hmm.
mean, Minacci, like they took him in the sixth round. They take relievers earlier than most because they just view them as pieces that are going to be there ASAP. Um, I am really, really high on Ben Joyce in
Oh
2025.
yeah,
And I'm not saying that Minacci is going to be Joyce, but Minacci was a guy that was one of, if not the best reliever in America in 2023 when he was at Wake Forest. They take those guys. The Angels take those guys more often than not. And I feel like he's a guy that could absolutely make the team after spending a good bit of time in Rocket City last year.
I like that. And then I think one other would be Matthew Lugo, who they acquired and
Outfielder.
with trade from the Red Sox, kind of utility type. Had a really good year in the minor leagues last year, but yeah, I think could use a little bit more seasoning in AAA. So potentially they just let him tee off in Salt Lake for a little bit. But
Yeah,
if they feel like he can help the offense, Lugo could be another option as well.
there we go. That is the American League, baby.
That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're going to do a redraft later this week. 2022 redraft. So that should be fun because a lot of prospect intrigue still in there. So it kind of just gives you an idea of where we're at with a lot of these prospects now. And it'll be fluid. It'll change again when we do it probably a year or two from now once again. But I think it'll be a really fun exercise there. Hopefully some more player interviews and stuff on the way as well. And then hopefully next week we will have a team top prospect update on the way to get back on track with all of that after the holidays. Any final thoughts, Jack?
I don't think so. No, this is
All right.
always a fun exercise, and it gets me excited for spring training and that time where, you have a spring training telecast on in the background while you're working or something, and you hear all the announcers like trying to figure out who number 74 is. It's fun knowing who number 74 is and knowing that they're playing for something.
Yes, it does get me excited for spring, which is not far away. We're a month and a
No.
half or so from, pitchers and catchers, a little bit less from pitchers and catchers reporting. So, and we'll be all over it then. So, up until then, we will be talking to you again later this week and looking forward to that. So, as always, thank you for listening. Talk to you then.